Hello, community. I think I'm one of the many who didn't believe in the paranormal. Even though some very strange things had happened near me, and people I completely trust had told me terrible stories, leaving little room for doubt, I still wouldn't say I believed or even considered the possibility that such things could be real. But in the end, it was my turn to experience something, to be that person who tells what happened, and in return, only sees the skeptical looks of others. Those other doubters who would only believe it if they came face to face with something like this themselves. To be honest, even though I'd love for people to believe me, I wouldn't wish an experience like the one I had on anyone, not even on the people who have called me crazy or who have called us all crazy, those of us who've lived through what I'm about to share. This happened very, very close to Mexico City, in a place where it's quite common for people to go camping. I really don't want you to mention the name of the place, the Dar side, because I know curiosity might drive a lot of people there, and if they go without being prepared, they could put themselves in terrible danger. Everything started on a night of camping that I joined at the last minute, not really wanting to go. It was with my girlfriend Mariana's group of friends. She usually goes out with Sophia and Diana to places like this, always accompanied by Jaime, who is Sophia's boyfriend, and by Alfredo, who has been on and off dating Diana the whole time I've known them, several years. Even when their relationship was at its worst, their shared passion for camping always brought them back together. However, one of those days, when they already had everything ready to go, Diana and Alfredo had another fight, and this time it was worse than usual. Alfredo said, at the very last moment, that he wouldn't go camping. So Mariana called me and asked me to join them. She knows I hate camping, that I've tried it before, but it just doesn't appeal to me. Going off to be uncomfortable for a couple of days just to be in contact with nature. I understand why she likes it, but it's simply not my thing. She knew that, but she told me she had a bad feeling about this trip, yet couldn't cancel just because of that. She said she'd feel safer if I went, not just because I'm another man in the group, but because she knew I'd always take care of her. She said it in such a way that I couldn't say no. So, I let people at home know, finished some pending work, and grabbed what I needed so I could rush over to Sophia's house, which was our meeting point. I'm not sure if you can sense these things, if you can feel when you're about to live through a traumatizing experience. But from that moment on, I noticed a strange vibe. At first I attributed it to Diana and Alfredo's fight, but then I realized this went way beyond that. There was a weird energy in the air, something impossible to define. Yet, instead of thinking we should cancel the trip, because honestly, no one was actually going to do that. Everyone just focused on saying that once we got to the forest, everything would get better with the fresh air, the trees, the distance from the city, and from all the stress that weighs on us. For a moment, we managed to forget about it with jokes along the way, and when we left the truck and started walking on the trail in search of a spot to set up camp, we were all much more relaxed. Maybe that's why, by forgetting our fear for a while, we made decisions that I now regret. The place they usually use for camping was already taken, and moving on a bit farther, we found a couple of groups also camping, one of them pretty noisy. It looked like they'd been drinking for a while, maybe since the previous night. I'm not sure if it was Sophia or Diana who said that if we stayed in that spot, we'd eventually get annoyed or have trouble with them. So Jaime suggested a different place, somewhere only he had gone before. But we'd have to head several miles deeper into the forest. He was the one who knew the area best, and he told us we'd only get tired, but that there were some really pretty places along the way, perfect for resting, and that no one else went that far, at least not casual campers who just want a spot to get drunk. Sure, it was going to be a tough hike, but he swore it would be worth it. And since, as I said, we'd managed to forget our nerves for the moment, and we wanted to stay away from the rowdy people, we agreed. God, how I regret that decision. We walked for a long time. Gradually, we started getting quieter, making fewer jokes, until we realized we'd been walking for hours. Suddenly, we saw movement among the trees and came to a halt, startled and surprised. We realized there were several people amid the undergrowth, maybe a couple or 5 or 8. It looked like there were dozens of people appearing out of nowhere. They went completely still, stopping whatever they were doing, seemingly just as surprised to see us. I cautiously moved closer to Jaime, asking him where he had led us. Was this private property? Were we in danger? He told me he'd never seen anything like it, and that I shouldn't worry. They couldn't be bad people. As he was saying this, he pointed to an old man behind that group. He was dressed in black with a clerical collar. He was a priest. We greeted them but got no response, so we just kept walking until we were far from them. We noticed that a couple of kids, maybe 12 or 13 years old, were following us from a distance, trying not to be noticed. Still, they were very obvious, especially because of how silent it was in the area. Every step they took on the dry ground outside the path made a loud crunching sound that was easy to identify. Finally, we arrived at the spot Jaime had been looking for, and yes, it was definitely worth it. The pines around us, the peace and quiet, the view. It was beautiful. I was surprised that such a stunning place, like something from a medieval fairy tale, was just outside the city. And now that same place haunts me on my sleepless nights. The thought that it's so close. We settled in and got everything ready to eat, half dead from hunger and exhaustion. After resting and eating, and joking around feeling more relaxed, we realized that the only sounds were our own echoes. The wind died down suddenly and we couldn't hear anything else. No insects, no birds, which are always around in a place like that. It started getting late. I was really sleepy even though it was only just getting dark. I stayed chatting with Mariana and Diana while Sophia and Jaime went off for a walk. We heard something, a kind of screech very far away. It sounded like a buzzing that came closer among the treetops. And then we heard the sound of people praying, people running among the pines, getting closer. We stood up, adrenaline pumping, looking out into the undergrowth, expecting them to appear before us at any moment and try to attack us or something like that. We thought about climbing a bit higher so we could see more from above, moving away from the light of our campfire, which could be seen from far off. But before we could decide whether that was the best option, we heard something among the trees getting closer. Then, finally, we heard something very heavy crash down just a few yards from us in the darkness, something very large. Right then, on the opposite side, we heard footsteps approaching quickly, and we were relieved to see it was Sophia and Jaime, who were also terrified. They said they'd heard the same things we had. They didn't see anyone, but they felt people running very close to them in the dark, as if they brushed right by them. We felt that something was out there, and we had to decide if we should head straight down to the car, which would take hours on foot, or if we should try to endure the whole night. Then something moved among the trees. Something was crawling, or so it seemed. Maybe it's an animal, someone said. Summoning our courage, we split up to search. Jaime went off alone. Sophia and Diana took another flashlight, and I went in a different direction with Mariana. We weren't going far from each other. We just spread out so we could cover more ground, but keeping everyone's flashlight in sight. We heard something in the distance in Jaime's direction. We saw his flashlight stop, shining on something we couldn't see from where we were. Sophia and Diana asked if he was okay, if he'd seen anything, but he didn't respond. His flashlight remained still. We decided to move closer. Sophia and Diana were just a few yards away, frozen in place. They didn't dare go near him. I told Mariana to stay with them and walk toward him. It was only a few steps, only a few seconds, but never in my life had I been as scared as I was right then. I approached him slowly, and I saw what his flashlight was illuminating. It was a woman with long arms, like branches, as if she were half human and half tree. She was dressed in black, a cloak or robe that looked almost like black skin worn by time. Her hair was tangled and dragged behind her, as if she were injured, trying to get away from the light. She could barely move. Jaime wasn't moving, he wasn't even breathing. I slowly swept my flashlight over that crawling thing until the beam reached her head. She turned, baring her teeth at me like an animal. Her skin looked like it was covered in bark and moss. Then something gripped my arm. Jaime had snapped out of his trance and whispered in my ear, "That's a witch. They just threw her down. I've never seen one before." He pulled me, trying to get us away from her, but at that moment we heard that same screech from earlier, the one that had echoed through the treetops, but now multiplied by dozens. "They're coming," he said. "They're coming for her." And without another word, he dragged all of us along and we started running down the path. From time to time, someone would get tired and beg to stop, to at least explain what was happening, but Jaime just kept saying that if we got caught, we'd never make it out. He said it was a matter of life and death, that we couldn't stop even for a second. If someone couldn't keep going, they'd be left behind, and he wouldn't wait for anyone. Mariana and Diana sometimes slowed way down, and I stayed behind them, pushing them to keep going. Jaime and Sophia raced ahead. Thank God we were running downhill, and sometimes we could rely on momentum, just flinging our legs forward, hoping to get away from those screeches chasing us through that damn forest. In the distance among the branches, I could see someone running in the same direction. I thought it was Jaime and Sophia, and that we had caught up to them. But no, it was those kids from earlier, the ones who had followed us. Then I noticed more people were running, trying to escape too. They were part of that group we had seen on our way in. They were running as if they had done something, or as if they were fleeing from something as well. Finally, we spotted a level stretch of the trail far below, which meant we were close to where we'd parked the truck. It felt like we got down in 1 hour what had taken us several to climb. But something wasn't right. It looked like the same place, but our truck was gone. So were the other 2 vehicles that had been there when we arrived. It was as if everyone had left. As if Jaime and Sophia had taken off as soon as they arrived, without waiting for us. And yes, Jaime had said he wouldn't wait for anyone. They had abandoned us. Then a woman came up the trail, walking upward, signaling for us to follow her. "Come this way," she said, and we went toward her, hoping she'd show us somewhere to hide. We followed her at a slight distance, stepping off the path. What I'm about to describe is very difficult to explain, but we started to hear shouts very far away, almost as if underwater, shouts from Jaime and Sophia, calling out behind us, but sounding like they were hundreds of yards away, just faint echoes. Suddenly, out of nowhere, we felt both of them grabbing our arms, trying to stop us. And there they were, right in front of us, trying to guide us back to the path, pulling us away from where we were headed. They asked us what we were doing, and we told them we were following the woman to hide. But when we turned to look, there was nobody there. No woman, no anything. Just a deep ravine. We had been walking straight toward total darkness. We went back with Jaime and Sophia, and where we'd seen nothing just moments before, our truck now stood. We got in, locked everything up, and I asked why we weren't leaving. Sophia said that someone had taken our gas. We could try pushing the truck to see how far the slope would carry us, but it probably wouldn't be very far. We found some duct tape and used it to stick extra clothes over the windows so we wouldn't see outside, and so nothing outside could see in. Every now and then during the night we heard voices and saw people from that same group we'd encountered earlier running down the hillside. Eventually we managed to fall asleep for a while until sunrise. At daybreak we decided that Jaime and I would head up to the campsite to retrieve our things, and the girls would head down to find gas. But after climbing for about half an hour, we ran into some of the men from that group we'd seen the day before. They were shouting a name into the forest as if they were looking for someone. We went over to them, and they told us they were searching for the priest who had vanished during the night, as though the forest had swallowed him up. We said we were on our way to our campsite, and we'd let them know if we saw him. But they asked if we had stayed in a certain spot, perfectly describing the area where we'd camped. When we said yes, they told us there was nothing left of our camp, that they'd just come from there, and it looked like a pack of animals had torn through it. Dozens of beasts, they said, must have come in the early morning. Whatever might be left was now part of the forest, and we shouldn't bring it back with us. We decided to trust them and went back. When we made it to the truck, a family was there with the girls, a young couple with 2 kids who were helping out. They were surprised that we'd stayed there all night. They gave us enough gas so we could leave, and they told us never ever to go so deep into those mountains on nights like that. They said there's a reason why people don't usually camp beyond a certain point or marker. They clarified that you won't always find things like we did that morning, but one thing you can count on is that even if you don't see them, they're always around. poking through the darkness, feeding on you throughout the night. We got out of there, and that day was extremely strange, as if nothing had happened. We tried to pretend things were normal, but the fear crashed over us the next morning, as if everything we'd been holding inside finally broke free. We got sick, really sick. I know now that fear alone can make you ill. Not a day goes by that I don't dream about that thing I saw, that creature dragging itself along, which was in no way human. Whenever it rains at night, I swear I hear that wailing sound drawing near. But I want to believe that it's just the trauma, something I'll be living with for a long time. At least, that's what I hope. I'd like to thank everyone for continuing to follow and support us. Remember that you can find us by searching for DM The Dark Side. And most importantly, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and leave a comment if you enjoyed the stories. It really means a lot to us and helps our community grow. For now, let's keep going, because we still have another story tonight. I agreed to go camping with my boyfriend Enrique for the first time, even though I was nervous. I had heard stories about La Rumorosa, and I also knew that my father had a terrifying, traumatic experience there when he was young. He always avoided talking about that place. Whenever we went to Tijuana, he preferred taking the long route through Ensenada, and if we were in a hurry and had to go that way, we would cross it quickly and in silence. Because of that, I had developed a certain fear and a deep respect for the area. Still, Enrique was excited, and his enthusiasm was contagious. He and his family often visited, and they had never experienced anything unusual. We left Mexicali early in the morning, stopped for breakfast, and continued at a leisurely pace. We exited the highway and took a dirt road, arriving at the part of the forest he loved so much just as the sun began to set. The weather forecast mentioned a possible snowfall, but Enrique and I were determined to enjoy the adventure. We set up our tent and started a campfire, preparing a simple dinner while admiring the sky, which was impressively full of stars, something you only see there in La Rumorosa. The wind started blowing hard and the temperature plummeted. The predicted snowfall arrived sooner than we expected, snuffing out our fire and forcing us to take shelter in the tent. Night fell completely. After a while of talking and laughing, the sounds of nature started to lull us to sleep. But as the night went on, an almost unsettling silence began to surround us, giving us a stark sense of how alone we truly were. Or at least that was what we believed. Around midnight, I woke with a start. A sharp sound, like branches snapping, came from very close to the tent. Enrique, sensing my alarm, opened his eyes and went quiet, listening. The noise grew louder and closer, now accompanied by a deep, guttural sound, as though something very large, about the size of a horse, was moving slowly around our tent. Enrique told me not to worry, that it was probably just an animal confused by the snowfall, separated from its herd or ranch. Maybe a deer. He had seen several still wandering in that area at night. He took a flashlight and very carefully opened a small gap in the tent to look outside. What we saw, friends, made our hearts stop, not as a figure of speech, but literally for a few seconds. A creature was moving slowly around our campsite. It was the size of a horse, but its body seemed disjointed, as if its limbs were twisted at impossible angles. The most terrifying thing was that we could hear its bones creaking with every movement. And its head was extremely strange. It had an ape-like bone structure, but no skin from the nose upward, just bare skull. I stifled a scream while Enrique immediately turned off the flashlight. The beast was sniffing the air, as though searching for something, almost like it could not see us. We heard a low growl, followed by more snapping branches. The creature was alarmingly close. Minutes went by. I know they were only minutes, though at the time it felt like hours, until finally the beast seemed to lose interest in us and our campsite, shuffling away. We listened to its footsteps, and the branches cracking under its weight until those sounds disappeared completely into the distance. I still do not know how we lasted until daybreak, But morning finally came, and with it our decision to hurry, pack up, and leave that forest as soon as possible. While we gathered our things, we noticed deep tracks in the mud and snow as well as broken trees all around, evidence of the creature's passing, proof that it was not just a nightmare. Years have gone by, but that night in La Rumorosa is forever burned into my memory. I have never dared to tell my father about it. I do not know how it might affect him, though his story is probably different, given that La Rumorosa is full of mysteries. Someday I will learn what happened to him, and believe me, I will share that with you as well. Have a very good night, everyone.